This is a 5 to 7 minute tutorial on epithelial tissue. This will help you for lab and lecture. Some of these images we went through pretty quick in lab. So remember, this cartoon shows you connective tissue with the fibroblasts, and of course covering the connective tissue in this case is an epithelium. And we have, in the connective tissue, we have lots and lots of collagen and elastin fibers of protein. Since this is a simple epithelium, one cell layer thick, we call it simple. And since the cells are flat, we call it squamous. In this example, again, we see connective tissue with an epithelial cover or lining. These cells are cubes, so we call it cuboidal. And again, it's one cell layer thick, so we call it simple cuboidal. Usually in the body, when we find simple cuboidal, at least in this class, it'll be wrapped up to make a tube, and so it would actually look like this if you looked at a cross-section of a tube or a hose. Again, simple cuboidal. In the case of the kidneys, these little tubes are actually tiny and microscopic, so we sometimes just call them tubules. So even so they're wrapped into tubes, it's still simple cuboidal epithelium. So those are examples of simple squamous and simple cuboidal epithelium. All epithelia are held to connective tissue by proteins called the basement membrane. And the basement membrane, if you want to think of it like a glue or a zipper, it actually is a protein structure that holds those cell layers together. Okay, here's an example from our lab manual where we just do whether they're simple or stratified. Again, if you see more than one cell layer thick, you call it stratified. If you see one cell layer thickness, you call it simple. And then of course, if you ever see cilia, you should always call it pseudo-stratified. The other thing we need to know is the shape. So we see columnar, again, mostly columnar. At the top of this one, they're mostly squamous or flat, and so we call it squamous. And in this one, they're kind of cubes and kind of columns and lots of cubes, so we call it transitional. So those are examples of the epithelia we need to learn for class. Transitional is found in the bladder, simple or stratified squamous found in the skin, the cheek, the vagina, the esophagus. Pseudostratified columnar is found in the trachea and some of the airways, and then simple columnar is found in the digestive tract like the stomach and intestines. Okay, so those are examples of epithelium and how we name them. Don't forget that all epithelia are held and bound to the body by connective tissue. Connective tissue has that typical cell called the fibroblast, as well as lots of collagen and elastin fibers. And these cells hold on to each other through the basement membrane. Okay, here's an actual histology image, and this one's a little tougher. If you can separate the epithelium from the connective tissue, you can see that this is a simple columnar epithelium. So this would be something like your intestines. If you look at this one again, we separate the connective tissue from the covering epithelium. The basement membrane holds the two together. This is very thick, so it's stratified, and the cells are flat on top where they're matured, so it's stratified squamous epithelium, and I believe this might be the esophagus or the vagina here. So don't forget the stem cells sit at the bottom or basal end of the epithelium, and then they grow and mature. This one you see cilia, so you should immediately just say pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium, and this I believe is your trachea. You also find it in the nasal cavity as well, and some airways we'll learn about. The cilia give it away. The cilia help move things like mucus. We also see the basement membrane really well here. Again, that separates the connective tissue and the epithelium. Here's that example that I talked about, the little round tubules in the kidney. Again, since it's a single layer of cubes, we call it simple cuboidal. And we can see there's not much connective tissue and basement membrane, but enough to hold that tube into shape. Here's an example of simple squamous epithelium. And so most of what you see in this image here is connective tissue, which is mostly collagen and some elastin. And we see a fibroblast in there that made it. The cover on this is simple and squamous, so it's pretty tough to see, but you can make it out as I draw over the simple squamous epithelium. This would be like the outside cover of the heart or the inside cover of the heart, simple squamous, also lining your blood vessels as well. So that's a simple squamous epithelium. The organs are covered by simple squamous epithelium, like your peritoneum, the pericardium, and the pleura on the outer side of that is simple squamous. Okay, in this one, again, we see multiple shapes. We see cubes and columns, so that gives us what we call transitional. And since it's multiple cell layers thick, we probably should just call it stratified transitional. We also see the separation between the connective tissue. Connective tissue, again, collagen and fibroblasts, some elastin. A lot of textbooks will just call this transitional, and they'll leave out the stratified, but since we're beginners, it's always good to always say whether it's stratified or simple, and then its shape, squamous, columnar, or cuboidal. This is just a comparison of stratified squamous and stratified transitional so that you can see the difference there. Again, it's always tough sometimes to make out where does the connective tissue end and where does the epithelium start, but as you look at these, hopefully you can start to see the transition and the difference. I wanted to show you this. Actually, this is where the intestinal epithelium, which is simple columnar, transitions to the anal canal, which is more like skin, and so skin is stratified squamous. And you can actually see there is a literal junction between the two epithelia where it transitions from intestine to more like the skin, and so you can see simple columnar and stratified squamous. Again, the epithelium is resting on top of connective tissue. All right, this would be a close-up of, say, your stomach or your intestines. Again, digestive tract giveaway is usually that it's simple columnar. And so again, sometimes in real life it's hard because it looks like simple columnar layers are stacked in there, but that's just the way the cut in the histology image looks. Don't forget, when you see stratified squamous, the mature cells are flat, the cells near the top, but the cells at the bottom where they're being born, the new cells at the basal side and the stem cells, actually look very cuboidal. So sometimes that can confuse students. Here we see the junction between connective tissue and that stratified squamous epithelium. Remember, the stem cells are down at the bottom. They're more rounded when they're born and when they're growing there. And also we see some fibroblasts, and don't forget, most of connective tissue is just collagen, at least the connective tissue we're learning so far. We even see some blood vessels in the connective tissue, whereas we don't see blood vessels in the epithelium because it's avascular. So here again is a nice shot of stratified squamous epithelium and connective tissue underneath it. We see some blood vessels in the connective tissue. Those blood vessels will supply the epithelium since the epithelium is avascular. All right, that is the end. That's your tutorial. See ya.